In this video, I'll go through 1 full year's life of a moringa tree. This is actually my personal project, testing out the growth of the moringa trees in my backyard. I'm in Southern California. I have an ideal climate for moringa trees. I even have decent soil prepared for them, which essentially it's just the regular soil that's here in Southern California. I didn't do too much adjusting to it, even though moringa trees love to have very loose soil that just has the water run through them. It's Southern California's soil worked just fine. So I was actually able to germinate my seeds inside starting in March and then had them growing in pots through April and May. And I had moved them partially outside in May in their pots as to start getting them ready for sunlight. And that's when I took the best ones and ultimately planted them starting in June into the actual ground that you're seeing now. Supposed to cut them back. I have two main moringa trees in the center there. You saw this one and then the one over here to the right that I decided to use as a testing for what I had read was the smartest way to prune your moringas early in order to prepare for a certain type of growth that I wanted. The growth that I wanted was to see not as much of a tree type of a growth where you have one main stalk in the center and producing just a few offshoots. I really wanted to have more of a bush style where there were a lot more main stems that were coming up right early on from the base of the tree. And so what I had read is once the height of the moringa tree reached around 2 feet, 2 to 3 feet, then you cut it way back, 2/3 of the tree, you cut it all the way back down. And then after cutting it back, you will then see this new type of growth. Now, I'm not sure if this is something you could do at any point in your moringa tree's life. It's possible. I just do know that if your goal is to have this type of growth, this type of bushy growth, that it is good to do in an early stage, which I have found out. And so I end up using these two trees as a testing process because they grew very similar in height, and ultimately I could see very clearly the differences in the way the pruning resulted. So here I go to trim it back. You can see how far back I'm going down on this particular tree, get the proper angle, and I'm going right above um, this one growth to the left there. So I cut that much off it. I was a bit nervous to do it. Of course, your first time growing moringa trees can be a little bit scary as to how sturdy they are to being cut, especially early on. And I had a difficult time planting these moringa trees because any wind potentially could knock them over. The trees themselves are not very sturdy, and so if you get too much just movement around the area, they are prone to not surviving. So here we are in our next clip. This is a few weeks later, and you can see already that the tree is starting to regrow, resprout new different offshoots. And interestingly enough, you can see to its right, this other tree, which I did not cut, has had significant growth. And already I was starting to second guess that maybe I had cut it back too early, because now this one looks like it's doing so very well in its growth. It's so much bigger. But I decided to go ahead and stick with my plan and then cut this one back a little bit later and see how it responds uh, to this cutting. So here I go to cut. I did learn that it makes sense to cut right at a growth rather than in between, because the tree will essentially die off that little top part that it's not going to regrow anything from right there. So I can use this right that I cut off in my meals. You can see how thick that tree is already. One of the things I wanted to touch on was spacing, how far you space your plants when you are planting them. I spaced my plants, it was more based on the room I had in the little garden bed that I had. And so I ended up putting actually more than the plants that have survived here, and not all of them made it. So some of them got knocked over, like I said, by wind, and ultimately maybe they didn't get proper watering. Watering is definitely an issue in the early stages when you first plant. You don't want to overwater, but you also want to water just enough so that they're not drying out and you're seeing the leaf droop. So, and the plants are very, you have to be very careful with the amount of water you put in them in the early stages. But spacing wise, I planted these plants about 12 inches apart. And now, as I'm re-recording this, the plants are about a little over 2 years old, and it's worked out just fine to have them about a little over 12 inches apart. There's plenty of space, and when I recut them at the end of each year, then they regrow and have plenty of space to get a lot of sunlight. You can see right now in this video I'm cutting this second tree to see how it's going to regrow based on this type of pruning. Now I didn't prune as much as I did in the one to the left, but I pruned about, let's say, maybe 1/3 back, so as compared to 2/3, and I was going to see how that was going to regrow. Now you can look in this shot right here, you can really see how there's some really strong offshoots coming from the base of this tree. That's what's really allowing for this bushy type of effect where it has more branches coming that are accessible. This one to the right that I'm grabbing from right now, even to this day, only produces, it has a fewer growth branches that it's producing from, whereas this one to the left is producing a lot more branches with leaves that I can pull from. Now we're going to be moving on to September, and in this video I'm showing really how much I am producing and using these trees to provide me nutrient-rich moringa leaves. So you can see I'm just literally pulling off a stem from these trees, and I've been doing this for many months now and getting really significant amounts of leaves that I can use. So I would take these leaves that I'm grabbing right now, and I do a couple times a week, and then I would clean them and strip them from the stems and put them in a bag, and then I would use them like you would any other vegetable, more like a spinach almost. So to cook, they cook very well if you put them sort of later in a cooking process. So if you were making something like a vegetable dish, or just even like you would putting it in your omelet in the morning, you might create your omelet, and right at the very end, when you would add something like a cheese, you could add these moringa leaves to it as well, and they sort of just melt into the process. So it's October, and I'm beginning to lead into the months where things are going to start getting colder in Southern California. And by the way, this is a look at the runt of the litter. This one tree just never really took off as much. It just produced little and little, and you can see in comparison what the height of the other ones are. So from about December through January, end of January, I didn't pick from these trees in order to help them stop growing. And that was going to be my best hopes from what I had read to allow them survive the cold winter months. Now, where I'm at, it rarely gets below 30 degrees even at nighttime. So I thought they were going to be okay, which it turns out they were okay, and they did survive. Moringa trees do not like the cold, and if it gets below 30, there you should either bring them inside or figure out a way to keep them warm. And after that, so this is now the same day, January 27th, and now it's time for essentially a new year of growth. It's we're getting close to the warmer months in Southern California, and so I decided to go ahead and prune everything back for a new year of regrowth. Um, and here I am cutting back all the different stems. You can see there's quite a few more shoot up stems from this tree that I cut way back in the early on stages. I think if I counted correctly, it's somewhere on the order of 5 or 6 major growth points, whereas the one next to it only had about 3 after the first year. So after performing your cutting in the new growth season, for me, like I did it at the end of January, it's sort of the waiting game to see when they're going to start sprouting again. I noticed already after only a few days, this is February 2nd, so it was only a few days after I did my major trim that I'm starting to see the sprouts come again. February 24, still slowly, but the sprouts are starting to come. This is almost a month after cutting way back, and they're just now really starting to come and grow. Here we are at February 24, and the regrowth is now apparent that these trees are going to do just fine. Pretty much every offshoot is starting to reproduce things, especially in the one that has a lot of different offshoots available. So yeah, as the months go by, it's really up until about May again. March, you can see that there is stuff producing that I could start pulling, but I sort of allowed the tree to get its growth going again to absorb some of the sunlight during the day through the leaves. So I allowed it to get some regrowth situated first before I started actually using a lot of what it was producing for consumption as well. So yeah, through March, here we are, and up until May, and now we've reached the 1-year-old point, and this is when I began to start using what it was producing again, which I felt like was a very substantial amount already to this point. Cleaned, rinsed, and used it in all of my meals. So please subscribe if you like what I'm doing, and I will be updating on the latest status of these moringas, which are now 2 years old as of this recording, and you'll get to see more things that I'm doing. Thanks a lot. Please subscribe and ask questions. Bye bye.